One of my hobbies is to look at the negative reviews on Steam for games I really like. So looking at the negative reviews for like Spelunky or Into the Breach, and just seeing like, all right, what is your fucking problem with this game? Like, how much better can a developer do than this? What could your problem possibly be? And actually, the Spelunky ones are pretty reasonable. This is making a noise. They're all about difficulty, basically. Just a bunch of people who just found it way too hard, which actually I basically agree with. I don't... difficulty wasn't a problem for me. Very early on it was, but it didn't, obviously didn't prevent me from getting into the game. I didn't have to be sort of like... Once I started playing it, I didn't bounce off it and then someone persuaded me to go back, which is a story I've heard from other people. It did just click with me. I had lots of moments of frustration, but the random generation just worked anyway. But I still agree with this complaint because I don't think Derek Yu, the developer, is a sort of absolutist on this subject. Spelunky not having an easy mode is an absolute religious tenet for him, and he would never cave on that, I don't think. And I don't agree that... I don't think you'd lose anything by having a little pack of 5 levels that you play before the rest of the game, that basically a much longer tutorial that just bridge the gap in difficulty between the tutorial and the mines, because the mines just destroy a new player mercilessly and make them feel like they're never going to get anywhere in this game. There was another interesting one on Spelunky, which was somebody said that they played for a little bit and then they realised, it's just this over and over again forever. There's no progress beyond unlocking these shortcuts to the Tunnel Land thing. Each run is just kind of all you get out of it is just you got a bit better at the game. You don't earn anything, and that's interesting in a couple of ways. I think it's interesting that there's first of all, I think that's intentional. I think that the Derek and most hardcore Spelunky fans would say that getting better at the game being the only reward you get is great, and that's how games should work. And from what I gather, Dark Souls is a lot like that as well. There's a sort of checkpointing thing with the bonfires, but most of what you progress in is just getting good enough to get further, and good enough in your skill, not in your character's level necessarily. Maybe there's more to in Spelunky actually, because you get no kind of persistent level up stuff. And there's there's a debate to be had there, and probably just not so much a debate, it's just a trade-off. If you want to make a game that's all about developing your skills, then you put no unlockable progress in it. If you want to make a game that is sort of where you always feel like you're making progress and you always feel like you're getting better and you have that, it's a very addictive feeling to feel like every time you play you're just getting something, you're getting rewarded, you're getting paid basically, then you can go down the other end of the spectrum, and most roguelikes exist somewhere in the middle. So I suppose, is it a roguelike? I don't care if it's a roguelike or not, but game I've been playing recently is Hold Down on, it's a mobile phone game. Wow, did I sound old saying that? I wanted to say Android game, but it's also an iOS game. And in that, it's like Breakout, you're firing balls at these bricks and you're trying to break the bricks. The bricks have a certain health value, and you fire 3 balls, I think it is, at once, and they bounce around, and then when they come back, they're lost. And then you have a lot of different, you have 25 shots or something, and you can fire 3 balls 25 times. And then all the time you're making progress, you're earning gems, and with the gems you can just buy fire more balls per shot. I'm just going to fire 13 balls per shot now. Or the maximum amount of balls I can potentially build up to as I sort of earn more progress in a given run is 99 now. So eventually I can fire 99 balls at once. And that's just way better. You just get way more powerful all the time. And it's incredibly addictive. It's a really compelling thing, because you are getting better at the game as well. It doesn't stop you from getting better at the game. But, even if you fuck up, and even if you didn't learn anything on that run about how the game works, you still got a load of gems, and the gems are going to make you more powerful, and you're just going to be able to breeze through this later. And it's addictive. Debate about which of those is better is, like I say, it's a trade-off. You can exist anywhere on that spectrum, and there's a bunch of people who will like it and a bunch of people who won't. But that criticism of Spelunky was very interesting to me because it sounded a lot like a criticism that we get sometimes with Heat Signature, where you play for a little bit and then you think, oh, that's the whole game. It's just that again and again. And with Heat Signature, it's not how I see it, because I'm still playing it after making it for 3.5 years and releasing it nearly a year ago. And I'm still, having new situations and new things happen to me. And for me, I see that as, I guess I'll use the word content. Like, there's more to discover. There's more. The game still holds promise. There's still stuff out there to be discovered and enjoyed that I haven't experienced yet. And for me, that's content. And for other people, like, if there isn't a new enemy type they haven't fought yet, then they're done. Like, there's no more game. There's no more content. Or if there isn't like a new area to discover, then like a new tile set, a new set of art, then there's no more content. They're done. I think so. Even though I don't agree with that mindset, I'm interested in can I cater to it? Can I cater to that mindset while still making games that I like? Can I do a better job of making things feel like progress? I almost wonder in Heat Signature whether we should have just the early plan actually was to keep the loot table, the set of possible things you can find in crates and from enemies, very limited at first, and you'd only expand it by unlocking these new stations. Like in the release version of Heat Signature, when you liberate a station that has a technology assigned to it, like a silenced pistol or something, that adds that to the shop, and you can now buy it consistently forever. But the original idea was that silenced pistols wouldn't even exist until it wasn't liberating stations at that point, it was going to be doing some special invention mission, and that would invent the silenced pistol. And before that, there was no silenced pistols in the galaxy, and now you can find them everywhere. And there's a lot of problems with that system, not least of which is once you have some good technologies, you don't want to unlock the other technologies because they dilute how often you'll get the good ones, which is a terrible problem, and Dead Cells has this problem. That would need a solution for sure. But it would, I don't know, that would have at least checked the box of like, there is more content that you don't have yet. But actually, in some ways, I think the bigger problem is that we don't signpost what there is to get. When you start the game, you haven't unlocked any of the special mission types, like the sort of, the stealth ones and the non-violent ones. And there's loads of items. Like if you've played for 3 hours or something, there's probably a bunch of items you've never seen, and particularly like combinations of traits and self-charging stuff and unique items. There's a load of things you don't have and haven't seen yet, but we don't tell you that. You have to just sort of guess that there probably is more. So I think in future I'll try and do a better job of like, if there is more actual like literal content in the traditional sense to discover, we'll make sure you know that. And then the other types of content, the thing I was talking about where like there's situations I haven't been in before, there's combinations of enemies, combinations of items, trying to solve this problem with this tool, I've never done that before, like that is content to me. I wonder if there's a way to, I've talked before about difficulty tourism, which is this idea I had it was for XCOM actually, where it was a problem that I was only ever, once my squad is good, all the missions are easy, and even if you offer me a super hard mission, that was optional, I wouldn't send my good guys on that super hard mission because they might die and I might lose them, and it's just not worth the risk. So what I wanted was like a sort of one-off mission that I just play with, like, here's these 5 guys you never heard of, play this mission, whether they live or die, doesn't matter to your persistent progress, just enjoy that in itself. And that's interesting because even a player who wants to play on easy mode and wants things to be very manageable can still dip into that mission and just see what it's like. What's it like to be overwhelmed by the zombies? Like when there's just way too many zombies and you don't have enough actions or ammo to kill them all per turn, you're being overwhelmed. What does that feel like? You never get to experience that if you're playing on easy. Or if you're playing at a level that's below your comfort level. But now I'm also interested in, like, could there be such a thing as build tourism? Like, just to pick a game that definitely has builds, Slay the Spire, you build a deck of cards, and they're very, very different, mutually exclusive kind of builds you can go for. There's one for the defect character where you accumulate lots of cards that cost no energy to play, And then there are special cards that when you play this one, you get to pick up all the cards you've already played that cost 0. Or there's one that like draws 3 cards, and if they cost 0, you keep them, and if they don't, you throw them away. And so all those synergize well with each other, and you get as many 0 cost cards as possible, and then that all works. So could you, in a more persistent game like XCOM, could you have like a one-off optional mission that you play that just, here's what it's like if you'd spec'd a sniper for just pistol skills, just in case you didn't do that. Like if you've never tried that, there are so many skills in XCOM I pass up because they don't sound good to me, and I've never tried them because they don't sound good, and the alternative is really good, so I just never use them. I never find out if, like, maybe they're better than they sound, but I'll never know because I'll never pick them because they don't sound good. And it would be interesting if there's just a mission where you play, here's all the skills you think are bullshit and put together in some way that synergizes really well that the designer has designed. And so if you're wondering, like, what is the point of that skill that's you get 1 more mobility point for every kill you've had this turn? Like, how many kills are you really going to get this turn? And maybe the designer had something in mind there. We're like, oh, but if you have these skills, there's a way to get multiple kills per turn and then still have a move left over to make use of that mobility. That would be interesting. That feels like quite a significant tangent from what the hell I was talking about. I only got as far as Spelunky's negative reviews. On the content thing, the Into the Breach negative reviews are interesting because almost all of them mention FTL. So I was surprised, like, it actually has a slightly lower, I mean, it's got like 93% positive, it's incredibly positive, but I think FTL has like 95 or 96. And I was surprised by that, because to me, Into the Breach is just massively better than FTL. Like, it's just a whole order of magnitude better. Like, FTL probably would have given like 9 out of 10, and Into the Breach I give 10 out of 10. And so I was interested that overall it seemed to have more negative reviews, and all of them mention FTL. They're all, well, not literally all, but nearly all the ones I've read. They are FTL fans who came to Into the Breach expecting another FTL, and all the differences are problems for them. They're like, oh, it doesn't have this, oh, you can't do that, no, it's not like FTL in this way. That's interesting to me, because I didn't see that really with Heat Signature. And I think I got lucky there, because I was making the game that's much more different to my previous game than FTL and Into the Breach is. And I think actually that's why it didn't catch a lot of flack for not being Gunpoint. There are some people who, like, you know, they love the story in Gunpoint and they played Heat Signature and it doesn't have a story. But not that many, and I think that's because we never pretended to have a story. There's no... We did a pretty good job of showing you, look, this game is nothing like that game, except that you can knock people through windows. That's about it. And I think because FTL and Into the Breach are both roguelikes, a lot of the negative reviews I read were specifically about that. They were like, oh, this is not as good a roguelike as FTL is, because a lot of people felt like each run is not as different to the previous ones as in FTL, which is really interesting to me, because in FTL, like, for me, FTL is like if Into the Breach only had 1 squad. If you could, those 3 starting mechs, if you could only play as them forever, that's the level of variety I get from FTL. It's the same thing every time. There are unlockable ships. They're much harder to unlock and much less fun to unlock. The things you have to do to unlock them are just more difficult and depend on random chance. And then when I have unlocked them, I just couldn't get anywhere with them. They're just like a dead end. Just cannot play with this at all. And so that just wasn't interesting. The extra ships in FTL felt like ultra hard mode. Like, you've unlocked a way to play the game that's way harder than before, and it's harder because your capabilities are just worse, which is not fun for me. Whereas Into the Breach has, I can't even remember, is it 8 squads? Is it 10 squads? There's so many squads, and they're all really well crafted experiences that are, most of them are harder than the default one, but not by much. You can figure them out. Like, there are a couple that I find especially tricky, but that actually varies a lot from player to player. I know some people find the smoke guys, as good, as effective as the standard squad, as easy to play with as the standard squad. I find them way harder. One of the hardest in the game for me. And so for me, it's like it's got these 8 different experiences, and they're really different, and they're all individually balanced and crafted in a way that's really fun, and I can just play it, played it for hundreds of hours, and that's where all the value was. Whereas other people just saw it as like, I don't know quite, why was that not variety for them? Maybe that they got all the variety I got out of it, but they just got even more from FTL because every single combination of builds was interesting to them. I don't know. And then another thing that really didn't make sense to me, or surprised me, was people who loved FTL saying Into the Breach has less variety because like there's only 4 different types of level. There's the forest level, the snow level, the acid level, and the sand level. And those are the different islands, and there are lots of different levels within those islands. But to them, all the sand levels were just sand levels, and all the snow levels were just snow levels, and so there's only 4 types of level. And I read that thinking, like, this is from a really hardcore FTL fan, and to me it was like, but doesn't FTL only have one kind of level by that token? Like, they're all just space, right? If you just go by, like, visual look, if you're just going by aesthetics and superficial stuff, then FTL is much more samey than Into the Breach, because it's all just space. Like, sometimes the space is purple instead of black, but even that's just, like, one node in an area. It's not... there's way less visual variety, and so I don't really know where that one comes from. But it made me think, like, they put all this work into this extra variety, and it counted negatively for this person, which is interesting. I guess I can't remember if this was like one person or if multiple people said this. It's probably not worth trying to cater to them too hard, partly because I just don't understand what they're talking about. But it is interesting. I think, you know what I think it is? No, I do know what it is. I remember now some more detail about what they said. They were saying it's the same 4 islands each time. And it is. And I think this is like, the levels are semi-random. Well, they're not actually random generated, but there's 300 different levels and it picks random ones. And because they're the same shape each time, like the Forest Island is always the same shape as it was before, it can be divided up differently. I think I'm right saying that, yeah. And so it's not that the levels aren't different enough from each other mechanically. It's not like they're seeing the exact same level every time they play. And it's not that because they see forest each time, they just see, oh, this is just a forest level. It's that the game is telling them this is the Forest Island. Like, it probably has a name. I think it's called Archive. I don't know. But it's a single geographical location. Every time you play on that location and the other 3. And because the game is saying this is the same place each time, even though I don't think it makes makes the actual levels more similar, that to them counted as there's just 4 places and you play the same 4 places every time. Whereas FTL, it's all just space, but every time the space itself is randomly generated, and so they felt like they're going on a different adventure each time, which is a really interesting psychological thing. I mean, yeah, assuming that my biases are correct, my presumptions that like the actual level of variety in FTL is visual variety is lower, and all that other stuff. All of this feeds into a thing that I worry about a lot, which is the expectations game. Like, what you find out from reading seeing where games clicked and where games didn't, games that have a lot of negative reviews and games that have very few. You start to realise Steam reviews, in particular, are more of a measure of was this game what I expected it to be than is this game one of the greats of all time. Like a review score in a magazine is at least trying to... a lot of magazines anyway, a lot of outlets, websites, are... they want their scoring system to be like the highest scoring games they've ever reviewed are the greats of the medium. They are the all-time classics. And I don't think it really... anyone who reviewed Spelunky and gave it like 95% or 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, the fact that, I don't know what it is, like 8% of players on Steam didn't like it, doesn't invalidate that. Even if there's significant backlash against it, it doesn't take away from that score. That score wasn't trying to tell everybody, oh, whatever you expect Spelunky to be, it's exactly that. It was trying to tell people, fuck you if you don't like it. This is an incredible game. This is like has significantly changed the medium and has contributed this incredible fusion of genres that's going to affect everything else and is just incredibly fun to play. And it doesn't matter if X% of people don't like it. Like, that's not something where I should adjust my score then because there's too many people who don't like it. Whereas Steam reviews are, they literally are just how many people liked it, who bought it, and obviously the people who buy it are people who expected it to be something they wanted. And so if your game is not what it seems to be, you get a bunch of negative reviews. No Man's Sky. Just don't need to go into depth on that, but that was definitely an expectations problem, and wherever you think the blame lies for that, it was certainly a mismatch between what people expected to get and what they actually got. And so that's interesting. Like the way I think of it now is like, making a good game is half the battle, and the other half is making sure that the other half is the expectations game. And the expectations game obviously has two parts to it. One, like there are two ways you can make a game be what people expect. One is make it work the way they expect games of this type to work, and the other is messaging. It's make sure they know what this game is. I think the second one is impossible. I don't think there's anything you can say. I think it's worth trying, and we did with like Heat Signature's Steam store page, even before release, has a big section on here's what Heat Signature isn't. You can't mine asteroids, you can't build ships, you can't lead a crew. Here's all the things that like, because I've had 3 years of people saying, oh, can you do this, can you do that, can you do that? And I was, whoa, they were expecting all this stuff that I'm not remotely interested in doing. Like, not only is that not in there, I wouldn't do that even if I was going to spend 10 years on this game. Like, just don't want it. So I realised I need to just tell people this is not what it isn't. But that's never going to catch everybody. Not everyone. I mean, you've got to click the more link on the store page to read the rest of the description. That's never going to. People aren't going to do that. So the communications part of expectations is very difficult. You should never rely on being able to do it to a overwhelming extent. The best you're going to get like 50% of the people who buy your game to read what you wrote about it. And so most of it is just like, how do people expect, when people look at this game, what are they expecting to get? And there are ways you can vary from expectations without catching flack, but, as a very simple example, early access games, like Zachtronics games, launch in early access, but they're incredibly well polished and basically finished. Like almost every Zachtronics game, if you get it in early access, you're like, why is this in early access? This just seems done. And so that's a great expectations thing. People expected it to be rough and it wasn't, so that's always going to be a positive thing. And there's other stuff like, you can have, if you made like a strategy game that looks like a strategy game, and then when people play it, there's actually a really rich and interesting plot, that's probably mostly going to count positively. Like, people who didn't expect there to be a rich and interesting plot, as long as you can skip it, they're not going to be angry about that. If they hate the plot, they might be angry about that, but I think that's possible to defy expectations in a positive way. But, crucially, if it's not a deep and interesting strategy game, I think you will catch flack for that. I think you'll get a significant percentage of negative Steam reviews, which is, it might sound like I'm obsessing over these things. I don't care that much about a small number of people disliking a game that I made, but you have to care about Steam reviews because they heavily influence the algorithm that Steam uses to put your game in front of people and just directly influence sales in a big way. And I am overly sensitive to negative opinions. I don't like the idea. But partly it's because I'm emotionally weak and I just have very thin skin and just can't take criticism. But there's another side to it, which is like, these are people who bought the game, and I consider it one of my primary jobs to prevent people who wouldn't like my game from buying the game. Like, that's as important as trying to sell it to people who would like it. Like, I want to repel the people who aren't going to like it, so anyone who buys it and it isn't what they thought it was going to be, they thought they were going to get something they didn't, I failed in my job to repel those people. I haven't necessarily failed in my job to make the game what they want, because often what they want is something I don't want. But I should have been able to prevent them from buying it. So I do want to optimize for this stuff. And I worry about it with Wizards, because right now, this is inspired by XCOM, and I'm making a game that looks a bit like XCOM, and I'm starting to get worried that people are just going to expect it to be XCOM and have everything XCOM has. And I'm not making that game. And so I've got to be very careful that people don't expect that game when they buy it. Like, right now we're planning to sort of focus on one room at a time. Like, this one room is the whole level, nothing else outside the room can affect it. And you just clear all the enemies out of that room, and then you're done. And then you move on to another room. So very, very focused. I'm playing XCOM 2 at the moment, and Jesus Christ, the levels are sprawling, they're multi-level, it's impossible to see what's going on because everything overlaps with everything. And that's one of the many reasons I'm not doing that. Size of levels, I think you can successfully communicate in a trailer and in screenshots, and that'll probably get across. But a bigger worry is just like, tactical depth, I'm probably not going to make a strategy game that's on the level of XCOM. It's probably going to be a lot simpler, and there are directions I want to go deeper on that they don't, but there's a lot of directions they go deep on that I definitely won't. Like the metagame, I'm just not going to have one. Like, it's not going to be simpler than theirs. It's not going to exist. I don't want any fucking base building. I don't want to be flying around the globe scanning shit and collecting resources. It's a tactical game. There's no strategy layer. There will be equipment, and you get to kit your wizards out. That's the current plan. But acquiring that if there's a strategy map, at most it will be choosing what mission you do. Just there's 3 missions. This one gets you this reward. This one gets you another reward. Which one do you want to do? But even then, it'll probably be more like these 2 get you these rewards, but don't progress the plot. This one progresses the plot, so you've got to do that one. So it's just, do you want to do those other ones as well, and do you want to do them first or afterwards? No, not really an interesting strategic decision. It's just a way of, just a framework to put content in, and the content, some of it will be optional and some of it will be mandatory. So yeah, is there a way to make sure people know that? How do you get people to expect a game that doesn't have a strategy there? I guess it probably helps that that sort of single room focus is going to look a bit like Into the Breach. Into the Breach it's not about a single room, but it's about this 8x8 grid, and it's very isolated, and you can see it's just all fits on one screen. And I don't know that they caught a lot of flack for not being XCOM. I don't think people really expected XCOM from Into the Breach. I didn't read any reviews that said that. They were all about FTL because there was a bunch of FTL fans buying it. So maybe that's not a problem. Like, maybe if we look enough like Into the Breach, people just expect Into the Breach. Into the Breach doesn't have a strategy layer of any significant degree. It's got shops and stuff, but that's it. But then, of course, the tactical depth has to be as good as Into the Breach, which, again, I don't know if we can do. The problem is, the reason I'm not too down on my own abilities as a designer, but the reason I think I won't achieve the level of tactical depth that XCOM and Into the Breach have is I'm not that interested in it. I don't really care about that kind of thing. Or at least I know that I'm very aware there's a big swathe, is that how you pronounce it? Or is it swath? Of gamers who go way deeper into that than I do, and who can play XCOM at a much higher level than I do, even Into the Breach. In fact, maybe that's some of the people who don't like it are the people who are just much better at it than I am, and so see the limits sooner. And I can't really cater to those people without being one of them. Those people are going to be experience things that I'm not going to experience when I play it myself. And I will test heavily with the public, but in any situation, 90% of the testing is going to be me, because it's just not practical to have other people test it every day. So yeah, I don't really know how to avoid that, except I was thinking about maybe I just call it a light strategy game or something. I mean, I haven't even made the game yet, so this is all premature, but it's just a thing I think about a lot and fret about slightly. But also, it's good to if you see these potential issues coming early enough, they can just be in the back of your head when you're making all your decisions, and you can think about, maybe there's an art decision we make that because I'm thinking about this, I'm going to be saying, can we make it look less complex, less deep, less like this, so just to manage people's expectations. And hopefully if you bear it in mind early enough, you can kind of control for that.